can hear me. Can you guys hear me? There's a little chat message system on the side of the computer. If you guys, okay, perfect. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know you can hear me. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. So my name is Anar, Allidina, and I'm a dietitian. I've been a dietitian for several years. I work for myself in private practice, and I also work for a diabetes clinic in Thornhill. So today I'm going to be talking about a topic that a lot of people have questions on, and we've heard this so much. It's kind of like a buzzword in the media about, inflammation and diet, foods to help prevent inflammation and all of that good stuff. So it is true, you can definitely improve your inflammatory responses with a good diet, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So I'm going to be talking throughout the presentation, and I just ask if you could please ask your questions at the end. That would be really helpful, okay? And hopefully I'll be able to get to everyone's questions. Perfect. So the objectives. After hearing this presentation, you all will have a clear understanding of what inflammation is. You will also learn the different diseases that result from inflammation, and you'll be able to identify the markers for inflammatory diseases. There are certain biomarkers that we have in our body that let us know when inflammation is going on. You will also learn the main risk factors for developing inflammation. You will also have a good focus on the diet's role in reducing inflammation. So here I'll be talking about top inflammatory foods as well as the top anti-inflammatory foods. And at the end, we're going to be looking at some meal planning and how to include anti-inflammatory meals into your diet. Okay, so what is inflammation? What exactly is it? So inflammation is a body's natural response to injury or irritants. We need inflammation in order to survive, essentially. So when something happens to our body, if we get hurt, our body's able to kind of respond to that injury. So what happens is the white blood cells and chemicals in our body are sent to the affected area to kind of get rid of the problem, to heal. And it's the first line of defense against any type of disease. Sometimes, though, this inflammation fighting process can lead to too much of a good thing. If there is no signal to let the immune system to stop the inflammatory fighting process, it will continue to fight, and even when the injury is gone. So this is when it becomes a problem, because your body is essentially attacking healthy tissue. And when it does this, it leads to chronic inflammation. Now I'm just going to differentiate between chronic inflammation versus acute. So acute inflammation is, a rapid, just a response to your body. Let's say you fell down, you, have a bump on your head, and so you see some swelling. The tissues are fighting it, so you put some ice to kind of relieve the pain. So acute inflammation will help save your life, but chronic inflammation can help end it. So chronic inflammation occurs when the body, again, what I said before, fails to end the inflammatory cycle. So there's a cycle that's going on, and sometimes, it doesn't get the right signals, and the inflammation continues to fight. So the body essentially is turning on itself, right? So it's leading to an increased risk of other diseases and illnesses. So here, this slide just shows you that with chronic inflammation, there's a series of diseases that can exist. We have heart disease, cardiovascular disease, heart failure. It could also lead to diabetic complications, chronic inflammation. So this could be, irritable bowel syndrome, psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis. That's inflammation of the joints. It's very painful. Chronic inflammation can lead to bone and muscular diseases as well. Cancer, metabolic disorders such as fatty liver, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, sleep apnea, and also neurological disorders as well. So we can see that chronic inflammation is kind of the root of a lot of diseases that are going on. So kind of getting a handle on it is so important, right, in order for us to be healthy. What do you feel when you have inflammation in your body? Well, it's very different for each person. However, there are certain common symptoms, and some of them may include weight gain, fluid retention, fatigue, brain fog, kind of forgetting things, just not being, mentally acute, just being, tired and sluggish, irritable bowel syndrome, mood problems, headaches, sinus and nasal congestion, in addition to joint pains, acne, and eczema. So these are just a few of the common symptoms of inflammation. So how do we know if we have inflammation in our body? Okay, that's what we all want to know. The best thing to do is to get a blood test. And there are several things to look at when you have your blood taken. So C-reactive protein, CRP, so it's a protein in your body, and it's in the blood, and it's the best indicator for inflammation. When levels of CRP are high or rise, so does inflammation. So according to the American Heart Association and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, a CRP concentration of less than 1 milligram per liter indicates a low risk for heart problems. Anywhere having a CRP between 1 and 3 is at an average risk for heart problems, and anything greater than 3 milligrams per liter is it's really high. It's a risk for heart problems. So very high levels of CRP, greater than 10 milligrams per liter, can also indicate impaired immune response or inflammatory disease. So this is the first thing to look at when we do get a blood test done. Your doctors will see what your CRP levels are like. An elevated CRP is more accurate than cholesterol in predicting heart attack risk. So it's a very important measure. So next time if you do get your blood taken, it's great if you can find out what your CRP is. If you have certain diseases in your family like heart disease, it's really important that you do know this number in addition to your cholesterol as well. Another marker of inflammation is how much white blood cells you have in your body. So white blood cells play a huge role in your immune system, right? So white blood cells are always on the lookout. They're always kind of like police. They're just trying to make sure your body's clear of any invading, viruses or bacteria. The white blood cells fight off infection before that actually leads to a disease. So when someone comes in with a high white blood cell count, it indicates something is not right. And, this could be infection, stress, inflammation, trauma, allergy, or certain diseases. So when your white blood cell counts are greater than 10,500 in a microliter of blood in adults, it's considered high, while a range between, 4,000 to 10,000 is within a normal range, a healthy range that your body should be in. So a high blood cell count, white blood cell count, indicates that something is not right, and that could be a sign of inflammation. Another important sign is vitamin D. Okay, so, we talked about, or I mentioned before, about inflammation, and your immune system is primarily the cells and molecules responsible for fighting that inflammation. So when your immune system is low, you want to make sure, you want to take care of that. And one way of doing that is with vitamin D. Vitamin D really helps boost with your immune system as well. So it's important that our vitamin D levels are high, and majority of us have low vitamin D levels. Okay, so studies have shown that this sunshine vitamin can play a huge role in reducing inflammation. So right now, especially living in North America, our days are a lot shorter. We're not getting enough sun, so we're not getting the vitamin D. And it's very hard to get vitamin D through food. So this is one supplement or one vitamin that it's I highly recommend getting a supplement for. So each 10 nanogram per microliter increase in your serum vitamin D is associated with a 25% reduction in your CRP. So that's huge. So we talked about CRP before, and one way of reducing that is to make sure your vitamin D levels are in check. And right now, we're not getting enough sun. And even in the summertime when we do get sun, we have to wear sunscreen, so we're not getting all that absorption. So it's really important to supplement with vitamin D year-round, especially in the winter months. So like I said, right, it's very hard to get through your diet because it's fortified in our food supply here, through our milk is fortified and different cereals and grains. So supplementing is highly, highly recommended, and you want to aim for at least 2,000 international units daily. You just want to look for vitamin D3, which is the active form, and you can find it in a pill form or you can find it in a liquid form as well. So what causes inflammation? There are a list of that you can see here, factors that can lead to inflammation. And what we're going to be focusing on today is your diet, right? So having a poor diet, which consists of mostly sugar, refined flours, processed foods, and inflammatory fats such as trans fats and saturated fats, can lead your body to a state of inflammation. So your diet has a huge role in how your body is, right? Being overweight or obese. The more weight that you're carrying on, the more your body, the organs have to work harder. So, achieving or getting into a healthy weight is the best thing you can do to help with inflammation and other diseases as well. So keeping our weight in check is very important. Exercise. Exercise is also, the first three are so important. So lack of exercise, right? Regular exercise reduces inflammation. It improves your immune function, which I talked about before, how having a healthy immune system is essential for fighting inflammation. It strengthens your cardiovascular system. It corrects and prevents insulin resistance. Exercise helps improve your mood, and it decreases the effects of stress. So really, exercise should really be seen as a form of medication. It has a host of benefits, and, we unfortunately are not getting enough exercise. So that's one area that, you can definitely improve on in addition to your diet. Stress and lack of sleep, both of those, can lead to inflammation, as well as having hidden or chronic infections with viruses, bacteria, yeast, or parasites, hidden allergens from our food or from the environment, and toxins such as mercury and pesticides. And this is where, eating organic foods is beneficial because it doesn't have the pesticides, which could result in inflammation, and also mold, toxins, and certain allergens as well. Now I'm going to be focusing on the diet. So the main dietary culprits that result in inflammation is with dairy and gluten. So these two food groups get a lot of attention. So I'm just going to talk about this a little bit. So dairy. So there's two components of dairy that tend to cause issues for a lot of people. One of them is the sugar. So dairy consists of natural sugar, lactose. And people who are lactose intolerant, which is a lot of people actually, are not able to digest this sugar. So it's just a very uncomfortable feeling. And if you're lactose intolerant, you automatically know you're lactose intolerant because you're not able to tolerate any milk, yogurt, maybe, certain cheeses perhaps, but definitely milk, ice cream, you're not able to digest that. And the other thing that people may have an issue with is the actual protein component of dairy, which is called casein. So these two, either the sugar or the protein, are not, they can't sit well with some people, so this is where they have to kind of avoid dairy. So lactose intolerant affects more than 7 million Canadians, so that's a lot of people. So the protein in cow's milk, called casein, can also be very inflammatory for a lot of people as well. Now, if you're lactose intolerant, there are some certain tests that you can do to determine that, whereas if you're allergic to the protein component, there's not many tests that will determine that, so it's all through correcting your diet, is just staying away from it to see if you have an issue. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit as well. So the makeup of the protein casein in cow's milk is different in sheep's and goat's milk. So some people may actually find that, sheep's milk, goat cheese is much easier for them to tolerate than cow's milk. Okay. So dairy can be very inflammatory for some people. The other culprit for inflammation is gluten. So we've all heard about gluten, gluten-free foods and so forth, and I'm just going to talk about a little why it's, or what makes it unsettling for some people. So gluten is a protein, and its composite is found in several types of grains, including wheat, spelt, rye, and barley. So gluten consists of two proteins, and they are called gliadin and glutenin. And gliadin is the protein people react negatively towards. Now, celiac disease, it's the most severe form of gluten sensitivity. So it's when the immune system attacks the gluten proteins, but it also attacks, the enzymes in the cells of the digestive tract. So it's an autoimmune disease, so it's your body's essentially attacking itself. So the immune reaction can cause damage to the intestinal wall. So, this can be, the intestines are really important, and that's where a lot of vitamins and minerals are digested. So this could lead to nutrient deficiencies, various digestive issues, and also anemia, fatigue, and failure to thrive. So in non-celiac gluten sensitivity, there is no attack on the body's own tissues, but there may be some symptoms that are similar to those who have celiac disease, and these include bloating, stomach pain, fatigue, diarrhea, as well as pains in the joints and bones. So again, gluten sensitivity is very hard to test for. If you are celiac, there are tests to determine whether you have celiac disease or not, but with gluten sensitivity, the best thing to do, again, like the dairy, is to restrict it in your diet. And this is really hard for a lot of people, so I'm just going to talk about how to do an elimination diet, how to kind of take certain foods out to see if it's reacting negatively. Okay? So the elimination diet. So this is really, really hard to do. It takes a lot of preparation. You need to really know what kind of, a lot of meal planning, but it's the only way to figure out if dairy and gluten, if they bother you. So what you can do, pick like 3 to 4 weeks and try to avoid any foods that you think, you react negatively towards. So for a lot of people, that's dairy and gluten, okay? You can also avoid other foods too if you feel like you have an issue with them, such as soy. That's another common one. You would want to start a food diary. So you want to keep track of the foods you eat. In addition to that, you want to look out for any symptoms that are happening. So if you're, having a lot of gas, if you're having a lot of bloating, you want to make note of that. At the end of the elimination period, so for 3 to 4 weeks, you've cut out dairy, you've cut out gluten, okay? So at the end of the elimination period, you're going to slowly reintroduce one food group. So if you're avoiding gluten and dairy, you're going to pick one. So let's say you pick dairy. You're going to pick dairy, and then you're going to start with that. So for one day, you're going to have, you don't want to overdose yourself with too much dairy, but let's say you have a few servings, like 2 to 3 servings of dairy. So it could be yogurt, it could be some milk, it could be some cheese. So this is what you're doing on day one. And then for the next 2 days, you're not going to eat any of those foods again, none of the dairy foods. You're just going to really focus on any symptoms that you feel. And if you do have any symptoms, you want to, record that. So you eat the foods for one day, and then for 2 days after that, you don't eat it, and you just kind of see how you react to that. If you experience symptoms, you have identified a food trigger, okay? If your symptoms do not return, you can consider that food group to be non-reactive for you. So you've cut out dairy for a month, you brought it back one day, you ate it for one day, then the next 2 days, let's say you didn't have any symptoms at all, okay? No issues at all. So then you can safely say that, okay, I don't think dairy is inflammatory to me, right? You can tolerate it. Now you're going to see if gluten actually is an issue for you. So then you do gluten for one day. You pick, 2 to 3 servings, not too many, and you see how you feel 2 days after that. So you just eat it for one day, and then 2 days after that, you just kind of are on the lookout for any kind of symptoms. So once you have a clear sense of whether one particular food group is a trigger for you, you're ready to repeat the 3-day process with another food group. So again, this process is it's really tedious. It's annoying. It's frustrating. It's tough. But this is the only way you can for sure know whether or not dairy or gluten is something that you need to change in your diet. But I highly recommend that you talk to someone while you're doing this, just to make sure you're meeting other nutrients as well. Okay, if you're going to try the elimination diet. So I'm going to discuss now other foods that lead to inflammation. So dairy and gluten are the main triggers for inflammation. So if you are having certain symptoms, those are the two that you would want to start to focus on, but you can definitely focus on these other ones as well. So the other ones that I'm going to be talking about today is red meat, sugar, and certain oils and fats that can lead to inflammation. Okay. So red meat and inflammation. So specifically, it's the processed meats that are really dangerous. Processed meats are high in saturated fat, they're high in sodium, and they're high in nitrates. And during the cooking process, high-fat, high-protein animal foods develop advanced glycation end products, okay? And this can result to or contribute to inflammation. A lot of animal foods do have this in the cooking process, especially if they're cooked at very high temperature. Your best bet is to avoid red meat as much as possible, especially the processed meats. You know, we see a lot of those lunch meats, the turkey, the roast beef, all of that kind of stuff. You want to really avoid that as much as possible because they're filled with a lot of additives as well, the sodium, the nitrates, okay? So you want to limit your red meat intake to 2 times a week or even lower than that. If you could do once a week as well, that's fine. And you want to pick leaner choices. So the highest levels of dietary AGEs are found in beef, pork, fish, and even eggs. Even lean meats like chicken do have a certain amount of glycation end products when they're cooked again with really dry heat or high heat. And this is just an interesting note that compared to other meats, lamb actually had the lowest level of dietary glycation end products. So having too many of this AGEs will put your body in a state of inflammation. So the best thing to do, if possible, is just to cut back on your animal protein intake. And this is a great way to kind of include more vegetarian protein, which we should all be getting more of anyway. Okay, so sugar. If you guys have worked with me before, I've heard my presentations, I have talked about sugar a lot. Sugar, I know, is probably the worst thing in your diet. Worst, well, it's not a nutrient, but it's a substance, and it's found in so many foods. So really cutting back on your sugars is the best thing you can do to help fight inflammation. Refined sugar, just weakens the immune system. And what we talked about before is that keeping your immune system in check, healthy, is the best protector. So sugar just weakens it. It has absolutely nothing. It doesn't do anything. There's no nutrients in sugar, and it's just found in everything. Refined carbohydrates is also a form of sugar. How our body breaks down the carbohydrates, breaks it down into sugar. It's glucose, right? So you probably have heard of the glycemic index. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit. So glycemic index is how your body breaks down sugar, okay, or how the response your body gets from certain foods. So there are certain foods that have a high glycemic index, such as white bread, white rice. They break, if you can see in this graph over here, a high glycemic food is the one in red. So it has a very large spike in your blood sugar levels, and then it goes down. And this spike, if we have a lot of these spikes throughout the day, this can put your body in a state of inflammation because you're having rapid levels arise in your blood sugar, and then it's dropping down again. So you want to see steady blood sugar levels. We want to see steady because our energy is directly related to our sugar levels, essentially. So if we are constantly having, foods that spike our sugars really high and then go down again, we'll actually feel this in our energy levels as well. So again, high glycemic foods increase the level of CRP in our bodies. So remember, CRP is a biomarker for inflammation. So what do you do? So the best thing you can do is to choose low glycemic foods, and I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to give you some examples. So anything that has usually low glycemic foods are foods that have a lot of fiber and that have a lot of protein. So when you have foods that have a lot of fiber, you're not going to see the rise in the sugars. The fiber is going to kind of act like a blanket and just kind of suppresses the spike that our sugar, when the carbohydrates broken down. So we want to aim for more low GI foods, and we can see that, which is represented in the orange graph over there. And artificial sweeteners, okay? So again, people always tend to artificial sweeteners if they're trying to cut sugars from your diet. However, there's a lot of mixed results with artificial sweeteners. There's been studies showing that it can actually induce an insulin response. Usually, if you're having foods that have a lot of artificial sweeteners, you probably are not having the best diet. So if you're having a lot of diet pop, diet juices, you're probably eating foods that are not that healthy to begin with. So your best bet is to avoid artificial sweeteners as much as you can. So I'm just going to talk about the glycemic index. So there are certain foods and a lot of fruits that people are not sure because, fruit is a form of sugar, and there are certain fruits that have more sugar than others. So low GI foods, again, we don't have a rapid rise in our blood sugar, so that's what we want to aim towards. So those foods include apples, asparagus, beans, broccoli, berries. Berries actually have the lowest amount of sugar and the highest amount of fiber out of all fruits. So they're great to have. And I know they're not in season right now, but you can buy them frozen. And they're great to add into oatmeal or smoothies if you're doing that. It's just, there's such great health benefits to having berries. Cabbage, antelope, honeydew melons, those are low GI foods. Citrus fruits, green beans, grapefruit, leafy greens, kale, spinach, those are all great choices, and pears. And again, you're going to see the whole grains as well, like oats and brown rice. That all falls into the low GI food category. Now, when we look at high GI foods, these are not necessarily foods that are bad for you, but I just want you to be careful of how much of these foods you're having. And if you want to kind of reduce the inflammation in your body, you want to really look at this, okay? So high GI foods, that includes watermelon, bananas, dried fruit like dates and raisins, pineapple, papayas, mangoes, corn, potatoes, parsnips, white rice. Again, we're just talking about some of the grains, pasta, like white pasta and white bread. Those are all high GI foods. So again, that just means that when we eat it and our body breaks it down, we're going to see those high spikes with these high GI foods. So you want to, as much as possible, include many low GI foods in your diet. Okay. So I'm going to talk about some of the oils and fats which can lead to inflammation. So most omega-6 fats are found in margarine and corn and safflower oils. And these are the building blocks for arachidonic acid and prostaglandin E2. So these two are key inflammation-causing substances in the body. So remember, inflammation, our body does need it, right? But we don't want to have too much of it that our body doesn't know what to do with it, and then it'll just it'll just kind of spiral out of control. So there are certain foods in our diet that do naturally have a lot of or inflammation-causing properties, which is good, but if we have too much of this is not good. So omega-6 fats are high in these pro-inflammatory fats, right? So in our diet, we don't get enough of omega-3s. So when we have an imbalance, if we have a lot of omega-6 fats in our diets, and again, omega-6 fats are more the vegetable oils, so it's found in a lot of packaged foods as well. So it's not necessarily like the oils that we're cooking with, but it's just in the food. Anything that's packaged, that's in a box or in a wrapper, it's going to have certain oils in it, and there are almost always the omega-6 oils. They're not going to be omega-3. So we don't get enough omega-3 in our fats. So when we have this imbalance of the omega-6s to the omega-3s, this can lead us to a state of inflammation because omega-3s fight inflammation and omega-6 are pro-inflammatory. So they're going to work against each other. So what you can do, if you do a lot of cooking, you want to really make sure you are using omega-3 oils. So you want to decrease or just, eliminate the omega-6s that you're getting in your diet, and that's through the use of soy, sunflower oil, corn, cottonseed, safflower, and mixed vegetable oils. You want to cut that out. You want to bring in extra virgin olive oil, which is very high in omega-3s. And other choices that you can do is canola. If possible, you can try to use organic canola oil just because of the process that it's made in. Sticking to an organic one is ideal. You can definitely also use ghee, which is great. It doesn't have any of the omega-6s, as well as coconut oil. Those are all great alternatives. In addition to olive oil, there's also avocado oil that you can try out as well. So you want to kind of swap in the omega-6 oils and take away the omega-3 oils and swap out the omega-6, because that can lead to more inflammation. I hope that's clear. So now we've discussed some of the top foods that that cause inflammation. We're going to talk about some of the foods that fight inflammation. And these are foods that, we're all told to eat continuously. And there's a reason for that. It's because it's good for us, and it really does help protect our immune system and our cells and all of that good stuff. So leafy greens, this is so important for us to get enough of this. So vitamin E, which is found in leafy greens, plays a key role in protecting the body from inflammatory molecules called cytokines. So vitamin E is an antioxidant, so this really helps protect us when we're in a state of inflammation. So again, this could be kale, it could be spinach, it could be collard greens, bok choy. These are all great greens that we should be including more in our diet. In addition, nuts and seeds, these are packed with antioxidants, and which can help your body fight off and repair the damage caused by inflammation. Fatty fish, again, these are really high in omega-3, which we don't get enough of, so it's so important to choose foods that are rich in omega-3, and this could be the wild salmon, mackerel, trout, and sardines. I get a lot of questions on tilapia, and yes, tilapia is a lean protein, but there's absolutely no omega-3s in tilapia, so if that's a fish that you like, it's great, but try to stick with the fatty fish. The fatty fish live in cold water, and they live in cold water because they have that fat to protect them, and that's what we want to get out of it. So salmon is a much better choice than tilapia. Healthy oils, like I discussed in the earlier slide, you want to really focus on olive oil and avocado oil as well, and then sticking with low glycemic foods. Okay, and I did mention those before, such as strawberries, cherries, oranges, and blueberries. Spices. This is a really great way to flavor your foods, and it really helps if you're trying to avoid sodium. It really does help with the flavor enhancing. So again, ginger, cinnamon, garlic, turmeric. Turmeric is, there's tons of studies showing how it's anti-inflammatory. So cooking with turmeric is the best, thing you could do, in addition to, garlic and ginger as well. So trying to make those spices kind of the center of your meals would be great. And again, whole grains. Again, they're low in the glycemic index, and they're loaded with protein, they're loaded with fiber, and we should be getting more of this. So quinoa is great because it really does a great job of replacing, regular rice and pasta in our diet. So quinoa, oats, these are all great sources, and quinoa and oats are naturally gluten-free as well. So if you are trying to stay away from the gluten, or you're going to, try to eliminate the gluten in your diet, you can definitely, or you should be including quinoa and oats in your diet. When people talk about, gluten-free, I don't want you to be choosing foods that are you're buying certain foods that are gluten-free, like gluten-free bread and gluten-free baked goods, because what essentially that they're doing, they're taking that protein out, but they're adding in a lot more fat and a lot more sugar. So if you're going to be doing the gluten or trying to stay away from gluten, I want you to stick to whole foods. And one way of doing that is by choosing foods that are naturally gluten-free, such as quinoa and oats, okay? Now, we're going to be talking a little bit about the meal planning. Sorry, you're not supposed to see both of these columns together, but it's okay. So let's just focus on the inflammatory side first. So let's say for breakfast you have some cereal and it's cornflakes, 3/4 cups of cow's milk, 1 banana, and a slice of toast with butter. So over here we can kind of see what we talked about, right, about the inflammatory foods. So their cornflakes are actually really high in GI. There's no protein in it, so it turns into sugar very quickly in our body. Again, the cow's milk, which can be inflammatory for a lot of people, and banana, that was on the list of the high GI foods, right, and a slice of toast with butter. So how do we make this meal better? How do we create a breakfast that includes the foods that I discussed earlier? So instead of cereal, you could stick to oatmeal. And, in the grocery store you may have seen regular oats as well as steel-cut oats. So the difference between steel-cut oats is that it's less processed. So it has a lower GI because of that. It's less processed, so it's more intact, and it's not being, it's broken down at a much slower rate than regular oats are. So it does take a little bit longer to cook, but you can always make steel-cut oats ahead of time, so it's quick and easy for you for the rest of the week. So swapping out cornflakes and adding in steel-cut oats is great. So instead of cow's milk, you can add in unsweetened almond milk. There are so many great varieties of different milks out there right now. So we're not just limited to cow's milk. We can do coconut milk. There is rice milk, soy milk, and almond milk. So 3/4 cups of unsweetened almond milk. Again, some of the fruits that we talked about, you can bring in 1/2 cup of blueberries. Add some nuts to that as well, such as 1 tablespoon of chopped almonds. Cinnamon, we talked about the spices, so adding that to your oatmeal would be great. We talked about nuts and seeds. Chia seeds. Chia seeds are excellent, especially if you're going to be cutting dairy out of your diet. Chia seeds actually do have calcium in them, so it's great to add that into your diet as well. And a dash of maple syrup or honey. This is optional. You have the fruit in there, but if you do need a little bit more sweetness, you can add a little bit of the maple syrup or honey. So that would be a much nutrient-dense breakfast than to have with the cornflakes. So you're getting in a lot of the healthy fats, you're getting in the whole grains, and the fruits as well. That's breakfast. You could also do eggs as well. Eggs are great. Making an omelet would be another alternative as well, instead of oats. So now when we're talking about lunch, so something that would be more inflammatory would be like a turkey sandwich with cheese and mayonnaise. Again, we did talk about deli meats, right? So those are filled with a lot of additives, so that could be very inflammatory. Diet Coke, absolutely. With the artificial sweeteners in there, it does send mixed messages to our body, so it's just better to stay away from that if possible. And chips, okay? So this meal over here is high in saturated fat and carbs, essentially. So a more healthier anti-inflammatory lunch would be to have a grilled chicken salad. And again, instead of mayonnaise, you can use in mixed or mashed avocado. A lot of healthy fats there. And you can add different vegetables if you want. And in place of bread, you will want to use lettuce wraps. So you have chicken lettuce wraps in place of a sandwich. And those are easy. They're portable to take as well if you're packing lunch. So instead of the Diet Coke, you would want to opt for water or unsweetened iced tea as well. That's definitely a good option to have. And instead of the chips, you can swap in 2 cups of air pop popcorn. So popcorn is great. You want to stick with an air pop popcorn because, it just doesn't have a lot of the fats and oils inside. And popcorn is a whole grain, so you're getting in fiber and you're getting in protein as well. And you get a lot of volume from popcorn, so 2 cups of that is pretty sizable. So it's this is a very filling lunch as well. You're getting protein, you're getting the healthy fats, as well as some whole grains. Now when we look at dinner, this is a typical South Asian meal, I guess. Having a samosa, again, that's with meat, and it's fried. 2 cups of white rice, meat curry with potatoes, and juice. So this meal is, again, high in fat and high in carbs. So, 2 things are really going to lead you to inflammation if you eat like this. If this is like a typical dinner for you, if you eat like this like 3 or 4 times a week, your body's going to be in a state of inflammation. So one way to help correct that is that before you actually have your meal, you could definitely start with a salad, or you could even start with a soup that's water-based. So none of the cream-based soups, just water-based with some vegetables. So it's a great way to get in vegetables as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a salad form. So starting with something warm, especially in the winter, like a bowl of soup is great. If you want to swap out the white rice and have the brown rice, and again, just watching your portions, so 1 cup of brown rice. And if you're having a curry, which is great to have because, we have the turmeric, we have the ginger, the garlic, all these great spices, but you want to, not have the meat so much. So having a lentil curry would be a great option to do. And then, again, just have a side of vegetables. So slide a side of cucumber slices and cherry tomatoes. A lot of South Asian cooking, it's a lot of the vegetables are cooked. So one way of kind of including more vegetables in is just to make sure you have a side of vegetables. So, again, it could be a salad or it could just be raw veggies. And cucumbers actually really go well with a lot of South Asian meals. And then to drink is water. Keeping well hydrated, drinking a lot of water is so important. So, you really want to get your water intake in as much as possible. And then snacking, right? Snacking is a big component in our diet. And if you are kind of trying to be gluten-free and dairy-free and trying to pack in a lot of anti-inflammatory foods, these are some options that you can try. In a day, you should have no more than a quarter cup of nuts and seeds. So, having unsalted almonds, cashews, walnuts. Walnuts actually have the most, or they're the one nut that have omega-3s, which is great to have. And almonds, because of the skin, has the most fiber. So having those two are always wonderful. But seeds as well, like hemp hearts, pumpkin seeds, chia seeds is all great as well. And you can even make your own trail mix, so you have something to go to if you're, out at work or running errands. Hard-boiled eggs, those are great snacks to have. They're very low calorie. They're filled with tons of nutrients. And, they're portable as well. So you can make a whole batch of eggs, let's say on a Sunday, so you have something to go to for the rest of the week. So just a grab and go. Edamame, I don't know if you've all have tried these before. They're so good. They're Japanese soybeans, and you get them at the grocery store. You get them everywhere, really, at the frozen food section. You see them there in the pod, and all you do is boil them for like 5 minutes, and then you just take the pods out, or the peas out of the pod, and they're really delicious, and they are a great source of protein, a great source of fiber, and a good source of the healthy fat as well. And it makes for a wonderful snack. Fruit is always a great idea. You just want to make sure they're the low GI fruits that we talked about. Vegetables and hummus, again, another great snack idea to have if you're trying to be, gluten and dairy free. Nut butters, again, like almond butter, peanut butter. You want to make sure it's an all-natural one, and you can spread this on like apple slices as well. So they're great to incorporate into a snack. And even having an avocado as a snack would be very filling. Again, these are all whole foods. And an avocado, depending on the size of an avocado, about a quarter to half of an avocado is one serving. So a little does go a long way. So you just want to be mindful of your portions. So again, these are just some ideas for snacks that you can incorporate if you want to, stick to anti-inflammatory foods. And supplements. I did touch upon this earlier. So really, the only supplements that I highly recommend, which is very hard to get through food alone, is vitamin D. So everyone should be supplementing right now with that. I sometimes forget to take, it's hard to remember sometimes, right, like to take your vitamins every day. So what I do, especially for vitamin D, because it's a fat-soluble vitamin, it gets absorbed in our fat, so you can actually take a whole week's worth in one day. So that's what I do. On a Sunday, I just take a bunch of vitamin Ds, like 7 pills, that are around 2,000 international units, and so I don't have to worry about it again until the following Sunday. And that's totally okay to do because it's a fat-soluble vitamin. Omega-3, again, this would be a really great one to supplement because, again, it's hard to get through our diet alone. Fatty fish is one, if you don't like fish, then you're kind of at a loss. So it's best to supplement with an omega-3. You want to look for one that has 1,000 milligrams of combined DHA and EPA. Those are the two specific components of omega-3. Even having omega-3 eggs in your diet would be great because the chickens are fed a diet that's high in flax seeds, so the turnaround, their product is going to be rich in omega-3. So they do score highly nutritionally, omega-3 eggs. but you don't need to necessarily buy all the fortified omega-3 products. You're just better off taking a supplement for that. A probiotic. This also would be beneficial to a lot of people. So what we talked about before is that your immune system is really important when it comes to fighting inflammation. And apparently 60% of our immune cells are found in our gut. So making sure our digestive system is running efficiently and smoothly is really, really important. And especially if you are going to be cutting out dairy, yogurt is a great source of a probiotic because of the live cultures. But if you are cutting out dairy, then adding in a probiotic would be very beneficial. So it helps with digestion, and it improves the balance of healthy bacteria in your gut. And again, that helps reduce inflammation. So a lot of our immune cells do lie in the digestive tract. So making sure that's working efficiently is also very important. So that could be including a probiotic into your diet would be great. And I do get a lot of questions, right? If you're going to be cutting dairy out of your diet, what about the calcium? So yes, dairy is a great source of calcium, but it's not the only source of calcium. The dairy industry has done a phenomenal job of kind of making us believe that we need milk, and we don't. So after the age of 2, we really don't need milk. And, with the growing number of people who are lactose intolerant, it just goes to show you that milk is not, we don't need it to survive or for our nutrients. We can get calcium in other sources. So I'm just going to explain a few other sources of calcium. So having more calcium-rich green vegetables in your day is essential, like broccoli, rapini, bok choy, Brussels sprouts, Chinese cabbage, kale, collards, or mustard greens. So you want to include 4 non-dairy sources of calcium every day. So 1 serving is about a cup. So you want to include a lot of greens. Nuts, seeds, legumes such as chickpeas, black beans, almonds, sesame seeds should be included daily if you're not having dairy. 1 serving is 3/4 of a cup of beans, or a 1/4 cup of almonds, or 2 tablespoons of nut butter, like almond butter. I also wanted to mention here that chia seeds, I think I did mention that they are high in calcium as well, which is fantastic. So 2 tablespoons gives you about 200 milligrams of calcium. So chia seeds are wonderful. They're high in fiber. They're high in protein. They even have omega-3s. So sprinkling them on foods is your best way to get them in, and they're tasteless. So adding them to oatmeal, adding it to any kind of foods that you're having to sprinkle them on would be great. If you're having an apple with nut butter, you could sprinkle in some chia seeds as well. If you're making a smoothie, like a spinach and berry smoothie, in place of protein powder, you can actually use chia seeds because they're high in fiber and protein as well. That way you're getting in some calcium too. You can also eat canned sardines or salmon with bones. That's a really great source of calcium. You can try doing that. You also want to include a serving of milk alternatives, such as soy or almond milk, because that's fortified with calcium. And you can also, if you need to, add in a calcium supplement, providing 300 to 500 milligrams. So, in our day, we should be getting 1,000 milligrams of calcium. If you're over the age of 50, you need 1,200. But if you can meet half of that through food and half of that through a supplement, that would be great. Ideally, it would be great to meet it all through food, but it's so hard sometimes to eat well all the time and to make sure you're getting your calcium through food. So, you could do half and half. That would be a great alternative. And that is the conclusion of this presentation. I did want to spend at least 10 minutes to answer any questions that anyone had regarding inflammation in their diet. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type it in and I can answer that. I have a question right now asking if I'll be able to send us these slides. I believe that since you registered for this, I think you do have access to the slides. I will. I'm not 100% sure, but I do know that this presentation is going to be recorded, so you can go in and access that if you need to. Anyone else have any questions? I know some people wanted to know about the glycemic index, so I'll leave this slide up in case you wanted to take a look at it. Okay. Yes, so I did hear saying that this presentation is going to be found on the website, academyofislam.com, so you'll be able to have access to it. Can you recommend an omega-3 supplement? Yes, I can. It's called Nutrasea. It's Nutrasea, Nutrasea, and it's made by Ascenta, and that's a really, really great product to have. That omega-3 is third-party tested. So what happens is, with the when we're supplementing with vitamins, it's really important to trust the source that you're getting it from. And because our supplements are not regulated in Canada, so I like this brand because it's third-party tested. So whatever they're writing on the bottle, it's been verified by a third party. So again, the brand is called Nutrasea, and it's a liquid form, and you take a tablespoon of that a day, and it's flavored. They also make one for kids, which is really great as well. So do lemons cause inflammation? I have a question asking about lemons. They shouldn't so much because they are a low GI food. Sometimes if you have a problem with acidity, that could be an irritant to you. So it really does depend. It depends on the person. So you may want to just cut that out of your diet to see, again, doing the elimination diet, just to see if that affects you at all. Okay, so what is a good margarine alternative to spread on toast? Well, good margarine, Beesel is not bad, but you could even use regular butter and just use a little bit of that. I would ideally like you to use almond butter or peanut butter, but I know that's not always the case. But using just regular butter would probably be your best alternative than to use margarine. Beesel is also, they have an olive oil spread as well. That brand is not bad as well. So what kind of oil do you recommend for frying? I like canola oil because it doesn't have any taste after that. There's no aftertaste to it. So instead of vegetable oil or corn oil, use canola. That's the best one to use. Again, if possible, if you can get an organic one, that'd be great. So yeah, canola oil is what I use for frying. So when I do fry foods, and what I would recommend. So it's high in monounsaturated fat. I have another question, or I guess it's a comment. A Crohn's patient can take brown rice as white rice causes inflammation. Yeah, that's true too, because it depends on the different fibers. Sometimes people who have a specific digestive issue, certain foods that are high in fiber can be an irritant. So absolutely, if you are someone who suffers from Crohn's or irritable bowel syndrome, you need to know what works for you. So if you know that brown rice is not going to work for you, then yes, again, you can swap in white rice. Again, you just want to be careful of how much of that you're eating, the portions. I don't want you to be having 2 cups of that. Sticking to a 3/4 of a cup or 1 cup at one serving would be good. Okay, so I have a great question here about the difference between organic foods and regular ones. So this is a huge, it's a big answer, but I only have a few minutes, so I'm just going to discuss the short end of it. So basically, organic foods don't have any of the pesticides. They don't have any, coating on them. So it's better for you to have. Pesticides, the reason why fruits are given pesticides is because they have a longer shelf life, right? So they fight off insects and all of that. So because they're protecting that with pesticides, if it's going to deter animals to eat it, and it's, they don't want to eat it. So it's just, again, what it does in our body. So if you're really trying hard to eat well, eat whole foods, fight off inflammation, that's where organic foods would be beneficial just because of the pesticides that they use. I hope that answered your question. And what about grapes? Yes, grapes are actually are high in GI foods. So again, just watching how much you're having is ideal. So like I talked about berries, being, you get they're very high fiber, low sugar. So just to give you something to refer to, 2 cups of berries as opposed to 15 grapes. That's how much in terms of sugar equivalent it has. So grapes are actually really high in sugar. Great questions, you guys. Anything else? That's actually a really great topic about the organic foods. I was debating on doing a presentation on organic foods because we do hear a lot about it, and a lot of people are not sure if they should be going organic because, it's expensive. It's a lot more pricier, and especially right now because our dollar isn't doing so well, food prices are very steep. So cost is a huge factor for organic. One of the best things you can do is try to grow your own fruit and vegetables, and this can be done in the summer, and it's very easy to do, and you have control of, what you're putting in. And naturally have organic foods. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me. Again, this presentation will be available on the website at www.academyofislam.com. And, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to email me, and we can go from there. If you are looking to cut foods out of your diet, I'd really recommend you talk to a dietitian so you're making sure you're, getting the nutrients you need. Right. Well, thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and inshallah, we'll talk soon. Thanks so much. Khadat Hafiz.